welcome to Teach with Your Hands, the podcast where we bring you the confidence, connections, and business understanding you need to teach the crafts you love. I'm Amy Costello. My guest today received her BFA and MFA in the 90s, and she's been teaching ceramics at the University of Wisconsin-Stout ever since. Her work has been featured in both juried and invitational shows at regional, national, and international venues, as well as in ceramic art books and magazines. She's completed multiple residencies at the Archie Bray Foundation, the Jingdezhen Sambao Ceramic Art Institute in China, and the International Ceramic Studio in Hungary. She's also currently a studio artist at the Northern Clay Center in St. Paul, Minnesota. Kate Maury, welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm all right.
So tell me a little bit about yourself and the teachers who've had the most influence on you.
Well, I started off at the University of Iowa and thought I would go into psychology, and then took a ceramic class and realized I really fell in love with it. And a woman named Clary Ilian, who was a full-time potter and a Leach-trained potter over from St. Ives, England. And she said, try the Art Institute down in Kansas City and study with Ken Ferguson and Victor Babou and George Timmock. And so I transferred. And they had a really amazing, it was nationally known program, or internationally known. And I think it was really successful in throwing, a lot of universities and art schools had kind of eradicated the notion of being a potter anymore. And they really fostered the ceramic arts, being a potter, but approaching it as a fine art. I would say their program was very cohesive when it came to teaching form. So they had an approach that made a lot of sense to me, where one technique built upon another technique until you would grow and understand form. So we learned cone 10 reduction firing, and it was a very good foundation, and taught a work ethic that I think has served me well. I think the most influential in that level was probably Victor Babou, who recently passed. I think it's a great loss because he had many people coming through that he inspired. And like John Gill from Alfred said, he would inspire you to make pots that you could not find in any book. So he would really light the fire and get you completely engulfed in trying to go after the functional pot that carried a life force and energy. And that's a noble pursuit that I think he really passed on to many of his students.
So where did you go from that program?
I really kind of consider that the boot camp of clay. And I went from there throwing porcelain pots and a cone 10 reduction to Alfred, New York State College of Ceramics at Alfred University, where I studied with, their program is incredibly unique, and they have like 6 faculty at that time in ceramics. So they provided an MFA that was free, and really enjoyed that program because you had many different people with different approaches, hand building, installation artists, potters, vessel makers. They were very open to supporting you as an artist.
So I don't know very much about Alfred. What was it that made it unique?
Well, years ago when they started it, they linked the art with the technology. So if certain engineering, the ceramic engineering, people that work for NASA and 3M and all of that, they could get grants. And a part of the grant for the sciences would automatically support the arts, which is wonderful. So money that they would pull in, a certain amount always had to go towards the MFA program and the ceramics. So it's really top notch with the facilities. And how many places do you go where they have so many faculty just for ceramics? And they're able to bring people from all over the world there to study for the 2 years for their master's program. So it was really amazing. Some of my teachers from Kansas City Art Institute had gone there for their masters. And at that point, I think it was really to teach people how to teach ceramics. But by the time I got there, you automatically got 2 years of either assisting a faculty or teaching your own liberal arts ceramic class, or you were an assistant in the kiln room, or you were building your resume while you were there and getting some exposure to teaching. And I try to do that to my students now.
That's very interesting.
Phenomenal. Yeah. They had the money and the fortitude and the vision there to be very supportive.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I read something you wrote that said my formal education has informed my current work despite my best efforts. What did you mean by that?
Well, I think when I came out of Kansas City Art Institute, I thought that there was a code of conduct, literally. Like, if you're going to be a potter and you're going to work with porcelain and you're going to be, if you look at my earlier portfolio, I mean, it really still spoke the language of the Kansas City pot, because the Kansas City pot had at that point a real look to it. And then when you move to Alfred, it's got a look to that. I don't think I really understood. I mean, I was a 14-year-old runaway, so I was like kind of a rebel. But when it came to like making pots, I really thought that you had to go to the sages to get the information on what's allowed, and I really kind of turned into a good Catholic girl. Like, I didn't want to disturb the peace too much, and it really took me through my teaching and through a huge life change here in moving from Wisconsin, my job, like, to Minnesota and being part of the Northern Clay Center. And I guess my age and getting to a point where I wanted to have more fun, which I know is very simplified, but I just thought I had followed the rules so long that, and they were all my own imaginary touchstones, I guess. And I was, I used the leach wheel, and I did not decorate because I was trying to pursue this like purest of form based on Sung Dynasty, pieces. And I really admired women like Clary Ilian and guys like Warren McKenzie. And I don't think I was making a traditional treadle pot. Treadle is the wheel I used. But I felt like there was kind of a code that I should follow and maintain an integrity. And Kansas City supported that. And then Alfred, I think I had a good foundation to start lobing work and altering work, cutting off the wheel and trying to assemble in different ways and trying to push the form. Where it took a couple trips to India, it took a big break up with an 11-year relationship, selling the house and everything and moving to the cities, coming off my farmhouse and quiet little town in Wisconsin that I was teaching in, into the cities, to where I really had to just rebuild from the ground up, like everything, and realize I don't need to be the person. If I was going to get something out of all of this, kind of like what I thought was quite tragic at the moment, you don't always have to follow the rules that you've put upon yourself. And there's enough happening in the ceramic arts now, and I see it come through Northern Clay Center with all the grant, people that are receiving grants, and they're coming in from all over. It's like, it's much broader than I assumed and that I inflicted on myself, and I think that going to India, I've been there like 5 times now, and I've been to China, and I've traveled some, and I actually now kind of make just so I can decorate. Before, I was all about form, the truest true, something that will transcend time. And now it's like my motto for a while there was follow the fun. If I start feeling it's getting tedious, I'm going to be changing things up, because I think that's also what I would say to a lot of, maybe the younger women don't have the baggage that I did, but get a really good foundation and understand what you're doing. And then, if you're feeling locked in, you're doing it to yourself. That's the number one thing, because no faculty worth their salt would really try to lock anybody in to a type of thinking. A lot of that, I think, was self-inflicted. I guess kind of busting out of that was, if I'm not kind of laughing and giggling, I don't want to do it. I'm making things, my sprigs that I use, which are the molds I'm pressing into and stuff. I mean, I laugh because they're like, what I can do with a Santa's beard on a weird, craft mold, I think is just funny as hell. But I mean, like, I'm not as serious anymore, and I don't want to be. So if I'm not enjoying it, I just can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
Nah.
So how do you balance that as a teacher, where you are trying to give your students both a really strong foundation and let them pursue?
That's very difficult. Yeah. Because it's like, I think teaching has changed a lot. Okay. Like the people at Kansas City that taught when I was so-called growing up in the clay world, you cannot teach like that. It's like, I feel like I'm having a conflict with teaching. Sometimes, just saying, look, this is terrible. You need to keep working. You need to show up more. You need to forsake all other things and get in that studio. It's like, well, we kind of have to soft shoe it a little bit more now and kind of cajole and coax. And it's bottom line, sometimes you do have to be the drill sergeant, and you just show up a lot, work in your studio, be exhausted, keep going. But yeah, you have to honor the strengths that the students have in their interests, so they can bring more of who they are. If it's imagery, if it's a sense of color, form, whatever, that they can make it more personal and that they want to pursue that. They'll be dedicated to that, and kind of keeping that in mind, that if their concepts are different than what I used to think at their age, it's like all the better.
So I was talking to Bruce Dainert a couple episodes ago, and
he's great. Oh my God.
Yeah.
So great.
He described the era of ceramics that he started in as the era of the brown pot.
Yeah. Brown town, baby. Like, brown town.
Yeah. I think it's that like the same thing. It's like very simple, like traditional kinds of forms and that kind of stuff.
Right. Absolutely. It sounds like I'm kind of flippant about it, but I understand what they're pursuing, and I do honor that. And that's wonderful. And I'm so glad that they are doing that. But for me, I can't pay homage to that in my own work.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm about. And that's okay.
It seems like, because you were talking about how ceramics is a lot broader than you thought it was. It seems almost like it is broader than it used to be, than it used to actually be.
Yeah. Well, when you had an influx of a lot of women, where before, the Korean War or World War II, they were on the GI Bill. And so they knew a very good work ethic, and then they would go and pursue these degrees, and then they would get the jobs. And, thank God for the GI Bill, because that really, kind of paid them back for their efforts and their work. And then they had a total generation, but typically men. And sometimes, they're called the good old boys, but I'll tell you, they had an influence on me, and thank God they were there. But yeah, it has expanded since then, because that was the people that are now, I hate to say it, but, passing on and dying off. And in the last 20 years, though, with the universities that have to have equal opportunities, yeah, you're going to get a bigger influx of women coming in and the non-white guy coming in, and that is bound. Plus technology, plus social media, it's just blown up what the possibilities are, because everybody now has an equal platform of Instagram, Facebook, and they can post, and it's definitely going to influence. The pots I look at, are so vastly different from what I could be exposed to when I went to the library and checked out a book.
Yeah.
So it's just so vastly different. Yeah.
So do you think that the kind of work that's being made during any given time has more to do with the students that are creating the work, or more to do with the teachers and their attitude towards ceramics?
Ooh, hopefully a mix.
All right.
Hopefully. Yeah, because when I first got the job, I didn't want to listen to the fellow teachers I was working with. We had a show of all the people that were just getting out of grad school, because that's the real conversation. What I thought was up and coming, and the newest of the new is coming out right there. So I feel like what the students have to offer can guide if the teacher listens to what the students are really, truly interested in. But it's got to be a mix. It's kind of like the old school of, okay, we got the work ethic, you got to show up, I can help you from this point to this point. But really, if you're into 3D printing and I'm not going to keep forcing you to do the throwing. I want you to bring in that. And hopefully we have enough dialogue and enough shared experience that we can, kind of understand what the other person's saying and exchange. But between the combo, it's going to be better. And the younger person is bringing that in. You just have to make sure that they're not like the bull in the china shop, where they need a little direction, coaxing, and hopefully being exposed to the right things at the right time. And hopefully the teacher can do that.
Have you ever been in a situation yourself as a student, or maybe observed as a faculty a situation where a teacher has kind of become a hindrance?
Yes. Sometimes I think I have tenure, and I'm very glad I have tenure. But sometimes I think tenure can be a hindrance to other faculty. Because the newest ideas and the most open may be that new faculty coming in. And I saw it in my own community, my own school, we had 13 people retire. And it's not to bash any of them, but yeah, I could see that one or two people could really negatively impact a new person coming in. Because the new person, if you're in a meeting or whatever, somebody said to me, you can always tell who the tenured and who is not in a meeting, who will speak up and who will not. And that can be, I think, a real detriment to anybody and everybody in a learning environment that's a power structure.
Yeah.
It all depends, but yeah, it can have a negative effect, or they can be like their information is outdated, or they have a certain dogma that can definitely prevent certain things happening in a studio situation with students too. Yeah. And there's a time to get the heck out, know when to get out of their way.
Yeah.
That's Wayne Higby said that to me. I have immense respect for Wayne Higby. I said, what would you tell somebody just leaving that's going to go into teaching? And without hesitation, he said, know when to step out of their way. And I think oh yeah.
It almost seems like you have maybe like a dislike for authority, or at least formality. And I've heard you say multiple times that you dislike presenting yourself as a professor because it changes your relationship with students.
Yeah.
Can you tell me more about that?
Well, sometimes that can cause a real, you share, maybe you overshare with students, and then they can pull that, rug out from under you if they don't get the grade they want or something weird. But I mean, you really have to be open to also what, who is that student? What do they do with their time, and what are you sharing, and what do they have to say? What's their perspective? I want to get to know that person and what interests them. What are they trying to say? And I think if I pull this, the hierarchy, some churches, I was just over in Hungary a couple years ago in the Reformation, you could see that the priest was in the center and everybody was on equal footing, and it wasn't, you walk into the Catholic, I mean, we're getting really kind of, sorry about this, but, where they are on an altar and they're higher than the parishioners. I kind of feel that is not the way. I do not want to play that card too much. I want them to feel like they can talk to me and it's a relationship. Because I'm thinking, God, what can I also learn from them? Because they're the new. They've got the new thoughts. They've got a different type of brain that has developed during a different era. And what is it like to be them? So I'm kind of interested in that. I already know me and what I grew up with. And I don't need to pull out a trump card in that one, So
yeah.
I would rather just see really scratch the surface, really, who are you and what do you want to say? And God, I'm amazed that these young people, I think it's such an honor that you're able to see that. And you have an invitation into that process. That's amazing to me. Anyway, my students might not know that, but sometimes I do. I'm I really feel like I'm honored to have such great folks around me, and that these people that are really pursuing something, and they don't need to, they could have gone for a different degree and made 3 times the amount of money, and they're in slinging it, and trying to say something, and they have passion about that. I just wish I saw more passion too. That's another thing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. A lot of people just take classes for the 3 credits, or this is an extension of high school. And then because of the university that I'm at, I'm not at an art school, and people have moved from all over the world to, come study with me. Most of the students are from either Wisconsin and Minnesota, and some of them are from a town under 2,000. And I don't mean to bash at these people, and I'm not, but I'm just saying that's very different from the Kansas City Art Institute, where there was 40 people moved there to study with Ken Ferguson. Different, very different. So they're just taking a 3-credit class. And it took me years to kind of get over myself, I think, where it was hey man, this is just as valid of an experience as anything. And you can still build a decent program. And we've graduated some really great people have come through. So yeah. But the hierarchy thing, no, I'm not into.
Yeah.
No.
How does knowing that the goals of your students, or just knowing what they are, how does that affect how you teach your classes?
Well, I'm really thinking more about my seniors right now, like Lily, like Emily, like these strong women. We predominantly had males. And so now we have this group of women. And I'm thinking, as a female instructor, helping them be okay with having their voice and supporting strong women in that program. So, like, what they're coming in with and what they want to say. And one, it really specifically wants to deal with feminism, so you got to hear her stories and you've got to deal with how she's processing things and be supportive of that. I don't know if that answered the question. What was the...
So I'm thinking about how, because you were talking about how you wish students came in with more passion. Does that mean like you wish students came in wanting to be...
Yeah, ceramic artists, and they know what they want.
Yeah. So how does that change your classes, knowing that some of your students aren't like that?
I do have a class that still has a lot of art and design majors, and that's good.
Okay.
So the way that the classes are structured, I may have a few, like out of 20, I may have 4 that are non-art and design majors. But really, I'm lucky because a lot of them, the way our school and the admissions and credits and everything kind of plays out, a lot of them are art and design majors. So they come in with industrial design and they already know how to build 3D stuff and they're comfortable with it. But there's no prerequisites for my class. So if somebody's in hospitality and tourism and they show up, they can take a class and absolutely have no sense of principles or elements of design or anything, but they have a good work ethic. So, like, you got to work with what you got. I've had some pretty good results throughout, but the hunger meaning, being a ceramic artist, a lot of them don't know that when they walk in. And I'm still, like, this last semester, I just got done with finals and evaluations. God, when all the work got set out, I was like, dang, these guys are like pretty good. They were better than I was leaving Iowa to go to art school. Yeah, we do have pretty high success rate. Yeah, whatever that means.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you define success in one of your classes?
I think passion to come back. A lot of them, have emailed me. I am amazed. A lot of them emailed me this semester. Hey, I did have a really good semester. And they don't have to pander to me. They may come back, they may not. They're not art students, and that they really enjoyed it. Some of them are graduating. They want to go on to an art center, but they're not artists, but they want to keep making, and they're in touch with that a little bit more, and that's great. Try to understand that we are actually closing a door. The rest of the world can do whatever it wants, blow up. Trump can do whatever he wants today, but we're here. And we can make a great community. So if they can tap into that and they enjoy it and there's some laughs and there's some things, but they have great projects, that's good. That's success to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's a residency?
Ooh. Well, a residency is where you go, you apply to another place that supports ceramics and artists, and you go and you stay there for anything between like 2 weeks to a month to a full summer to 2 years.
Oh, wow.
And you can have this really concentrated experience where you don't have a job, you could, but mine's like, say, a summer residency. So you go over to China and you lose all the underpinnings of what you understand. You don't know the language. You're sleeping in a completely different style of bed. You have a different breakfast. You have people that look different, that dress different. And here's a material that has its own nuances. Yeah, it's still porcelain, but whoa, it's very different. And you smell their air and you look at their rice fields and you're in their bamboo forests and you go, it just shifts your perspective and is challenging on a couple different layers. And then hopefully you build some type of community with the other people that are going through the residency with you. And that can be, this shared experience kind of makes you bond in ways that are just wonderful. Like the place in Hungary that I went with some Kansas City Art Institute students, but then also it was a special artist group. And I don't know how special we were, but we lived in the same like dormitory. We cooked and we ate together and we made together. And it was kind of like a relaxed graduate program. So that's good, because you can have this really kind of concentrated, almost like I didn't have a very tight family. So I think that it's that family kind of thing. Like you got your brothers and sisters there for a while because you're all in this together and you're trying to figure it out. And you also kind of loosen up your habits and your perspective and your expectations, because maybe the material's not going to work out. You don't know the kiln. You're there for the experience, not necessarily all the time the finished products.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that's, I think, a really good notion of what a residency program is. I've been to a couple different ones, and the first time I went to China versus the second and third time I went, because I know at that time it's like it's difficult to get your stuff shipped. It's difficult to get it, even find bubble wrap is, the clay is difficult to work with. So the next time I went, I dug up Ming Dynasty shards out of the hillsides, and I had a local artisan work with me to do floor mosaics. I mean, it was just amazing experience that I've never done. But wow, an American girl from Dubuque, Iowa can work with like Ming Dynasty shards and see these things, unearthed. And you're the first person that's seen them in how many 100 years? That's cool. Yeah. And then the cadence of the language, you don't understand what anybody is saying. And yet you have this, people kind of let down their guard and they communicate in a different way. And that's really, it really releases people to be closer. I would recommend traveling and doing residencies elsewhere to really make you expand your notion of who you are.
Have you had work that's been influenced directly, that is stuff that you do in your own studio from those experiences?
Yeah. I mean, like the work that I make is heavily influenced by grottos and shrines from India, and the ornate and the decorative, and that it's part of celebrating life, because you don't necessarily have to go to a museum in India. You go just walk on the streets, and there are shrines that honor the gods and honor the relatives, and they decorate with flowers, and their textiles are phenomenal. And so that has heavily influenced my work, patterning and embroidery. It blows my mind, because I've been to a lot of the villages, and I've been to the Pakistan border and went out to see the Rabari and the Bani tribes that embroider their dowry for marriage. And it's pretty phenomenal. So yeah, that heavily influenced my work. But so did the Dickeyville Grotto, in Wisconsin. I mean, where the priests kind of did their homage to God way back in the 20s. So that little bits of glass and shells, and I mean, it's like acre after acre of this very ornate shrines.
Yeah,
it's kind of so like, I was always embarrassed about it when I was trying to follow the rules, and now I just like, oh my God, it's great.
Yeah.
So just it makes me feel good. So there you go.
There you go.
There you go.
So I know that getting an MFA is required in order to be a professor in the first place, but do you feel like your MFA has helped you be a better teacher?
They never taught you how to teach. Like we have art ed folks that are doing like, oh my God, horrible classes on how to do on how to teach. I think the MFA really shows you how to think differently, or how to ask questions. Open-ended questions. That's a big thing. Open-ended questions, not good, bad, not value like that, but like, what happens if I do this? How does this develop and transform, and how to be receptive, and how to take input from other people and not assume the correct answer. Yeah.
So does being able to ask those kind of questions help you in your teaching?
Yeah, definitely. And then the students get nervous because I start asking them questions. I'm like, no, just trying to get you kind of where you're at. I think like where I'm at right now, it gets daunting because it's a lot of technique that I teach. And
are you teaching mostly beginning classes?
Beginning through, intermediate and advanced. But really, I find that the students, once they start to so-called find their voice, and they've had enough of the, aesthetics, and they have other classes, I've been surprised how sophisticated some of their thoughts are when I'll visit the aesthetics class I just did. And I'm just like, my God, the conversations that these students are having, I never had any idea, because I'm still trying to go, oh, okay, now you need to compress your walls more, and, like compress your bottom. But really, when you get the more advanced students, that if they really break away and they start dealing with more conceptual stuff, yeah, you can have those conversations. But it's not grad school. I mean, their ideas are not as lofty yet, but their pursuits are. They're dealing with like a technical snafu that they're coming to me with, and they need to like figure it out. And I just have to say, well, here's the demo. And then you have to do it a lot, to kind of get better at it. Like we're practicing. So when you really, what your story that you want to tell can happen, but we got to get you to like understand the basics of this language right now.
Do you feel like it's necessary to learn in that order, where you learn all the techniques first and then you do all of the exploring afterward?
Well, it's hard to explore ideas when you can't get the material to do what you want.
All right. That's fair enough.
A little bit of that, nudge, nudge. And then hopefully while they're looking at other work, they get inspired while they're talking with you, while they see the seniors. I mean, like, because I'll have my students that are more advanced come in and do demos and inspire the next generation that, see, you can be here in 2 years if you continue. Or they also see that our area is very receptive to non-traditional methods, or to, how important it is to develop your own voice.
So how have you seen students change during the 25 or so years that you've been teaching?
I think their attention span's a little bit different. Here's the sad thing. Money's getting cut from programs and their haptic learning skills have diminished. So we've got, the way our brains were developed is because we worked with our hands, right? And once you start to work with your hands less, technology, and also cutting back art programs where they aren't getting that tactile sensibility, you have to really start from the ground up with some of them. And I had a class this year that a lot of the students said they had not had any ceramics. They hadn't touched clay. And that to me is like, oh my God, tragic, because I feel like that really keeps us in connection, making things and understanding materials and what our body can do and does, and the sensitivity. We're going to experience the world differently through that. And I think that that's very important. And just because we can't quantify, qualify, and put a price tag on it, like how much, we're going to make off of this experience, that does not mean that it does not have value. Because if you look at every culture had dance and music. There's a need for it because of what a human being is, so to be kind of connected to being human in the humanities and humanity. I feel that that's working with clay really aids that and is a benefit to the experience of living.
So lots of people talk about art in terms of the value of the artwork, but it sounds like you find a lot of value in the creation of the art. Yeah.
Oh God. Yeah. Yeah. The creating. Like when you create, the automatic thought is, well, yeah, you sell and you're going to make money and and I hate to say this, that's not the number one concern I have. Maybe now, like later in my so-called career, I'll go like, well, it's about time I start, like making money off of this. But actually, I really love clay, the material. And I like working at it in all of the wet phases. I like to cast it. I like to throw it. I like to hand build. I like to press it into molds. I like to manipulate it. But all the things like, of course, I like to plumb kilns. I like to build kilns. I like the glaze chemistry. I like to sell the work. No, I actually really am like the mud person. Like that. I really, honestly, once it's made, I fire it and I have to keep it chip free for shows. But honestly, I am not as connected to it. My relationship changes to it. And I do show and I have my work in galleries and all of that. But that is not why I'm in it. I'm in it because it gives me great joy to be in my studio. And I tell all my students this: nice, warm light, public radio, good music, something like that, and making and having a hot coffee. There's couldn't be in a better place. That's where, yeah. So the big gallery scene and making money on the work. I suppose after I keep thinking I'm like 27. I'm not. I can retire in probably about 5 years. I mean, yeah, I probably do have to start really selling more. And maybe that'll be more important to me. But honestly, my student successes are actually a bigger buzz for me than my own successes. Like, I love it that when my students achieve and they get a grant, they see a potential out there, that they see that their work has paid off to that point. That's really the thing I enjoy most.
So how do you feel about the relationship between doing ceramics as a profession versus as a hobby? If you're not worrying about being able to sell it and make a living, it almost sounds like you're focused more on doing it as a hobby and making your living some other way.
No, because a hobby, I think, is a different hobby is almost like a different mentality and maybe pursuit.
Okay.
And I'm trying, like, I don't do it like that part-time-ish and after my real job. And I mean, like, it's my focal point in my language. And people that maybe do it as a hobby, they visit, they don't live there.
Right.
And I live there.
All right.
I want to live there full time. Hobby. I guess you could say I sew for a hobby, but I would never call myself a seamstress.
All right.
So it gives me some joy, but it's not the focal point of my life. And for me, it's the focal point of what I do every single day. It has to do with ceramics. It has to do with either getting there, driving there, making it, firing it, teaching it. And even though it's not my main income, it's the teaching is my main income. But no, I don't visit, I live there. Yeah.
So what advice do you give to students who also want to live there, but who will need to make some kind of income? Do you push them toward teaching?
I don't think art education, like the K through 12, is an experience that I would want or recommend anybody to do. And the art education people always come over and say, please do not tell our students to not go into teaching.
It doesn't necessarily have to be K-12.
Right. But if they want to go into education, I say go get your master's degree and go into university teaching if you would like. Yes. But I have students that do it full-time. Brian Greenheck does it full-time. Adam Grutzmacher does it full-time. They also understand, I think, the work ethic that it takes to even have minor successes. And I have not made like that full-time. Like Greenheck and Adam Grutzmacher know a whole other part of that world that I do not. And I feel like I let them know that I do not know those things. I'll be the first one to say, you know what, come visit and talk to our students about that, because they know how to deal with the budget, deal with inventory, and deal with all of that. And I feel that that is a really noble pursuit, and that they have that voice, that they can serve the students that way.
Do you have any go-to resources for students who need to figure out the business side, besides just talking to alumni, I guess?
Not for the business. I will recommend other potters in the area. And I also have them kind of link up with people on the St. Croix Pottery Tour and make connections with other folks that are doing it and successful. So whatever tribe that they are kind of like wanting to join, go to those people that are already doing it. Like I freely admit I can only help you so far. Like, I know my weaknesses, I think. I try to, state the obvious. Yeah, I don't do the art fair and I don't do the ACC shows. And the medals person in my university, Masago, Onodera, she got a grant. So our students are doing the ACC, American Craft Council shows, to understand that part of it. And I'm just like the contact person for ceramics, but I think that that's been a really good experience for the students. Like, okay, how do you display your work, light your work? How do you cater to that population? So it's a good experience. I myself have not done that. So I've been there, witnessed it, and then try to make connections with other folks that are doing it while they're there. Yeah.
What is the most difficult skill to teach in ceramics?
Skill. Ooh.
Yeah.
It's really not the skill. It's the willing to put the hours in to a point where you're exhausted and you still show up and do it the next day over and over and over again. And it's not a 9 to 5. That's got to happen from when they're like little kids on up. And sometimes that can be a very rude awakening once they hit college and you got a professor that is supposed to be the nice mom, because they've got preconceived notions. And actually it's like, no, sorry, I got to hold your feet over the fire here. You didn't do the work that's needed. So it's not even the skill like that. It's not a skill set. It's more like the understanding of what it does take. And I've been thinking about that lately a lot because we worked an ungodly amount of hours when we went to school. That's the boot camp part. And I think that happened. And I thought that it was such a soul crushing thing at the time because you're exhausted and all that. And you're in a cinder block building and like this is not creative. And I did that for 9 years. I did 7 years undergraduate and then 2 years grad and did summers and everything. And I can say after my undergraduate, I was pretty burned out. Then I went to grad school and they honored more of your soul, and you could practice being the artist and really talk about your own pursuits and your interests. But I think that the first experience with the Art Institute, the Kansas City, and the work ethic, I think I'm realizing it's because if you didn't do it there and you didn't realize that mindset, when you get out and you get a job and you get a house and a partner and maybe kids, I chose not to have children, your life gets very splintered. And so it's going to be a juggling act from that point on. And how much you need to focus on it to get it to work, to get a full body of work, to get it out there, to get the shows and the recognition and to get the, I feel like maybe that's why it was like that. Because it just seemed like insane to me, hours, but I kept doing it, and damn it, I'm going to keep up with the rest of them, if not do more, and I was like, but this is really difficult. I think it's because if they don't set the bar that high then, when you get out, you will never understand really what has to happen to get it to work in an environment, a country that does not support the arts that much or doesn't understand why clay is really that important to you. They're not your tribe and they don't share the same language. Now, really try to get there. Understanding that kind of intensity that never leaves you. That to me, that like never, ever, it's like the old war stories, you tell with the other folks. It's like, wow, no, we really went through this really intense experience and a lot of other people don't care. And okay, so I'm kind of isolated now. And I think isolation, that was very difficult right when I got out of school because I'd been in it for so long. And that's a very hard thing because we're in a culture or you're in an area of the country. I feel very lucky that I'm part of Northern Clay Center. The community here is unbelievable. There's like maximum capacity of potters here where, Des Moines, Iowa might not have that. And that's where I went right after grad school. I did a little stint at an art center and I felt incredibly isolated. So you have to kind of surround yourself with people that have similar interests. And sometimes that's very difficult. Are you out of school right now?
Yeah.
Do you find it fairly isolating or not? Because if you don't go to your studio, nobody really cares, right?
Yeah. I guess just because of the internet and technology and Instagram and that kind of thing.
It's better.
Yeah, I feel like I am less isolated than I would be otherwise, for sure.
Yeah. Well, way back, like when there wasn't, like I get on my, I do like Facebook time. So I am seeing my friends in their studio now. We're kind of cheerleaders for each other to keep going, to keep doing it. Yeah, I know you've got, your job and your kids and your whatever, but, have you gotten down to your studio yet today? And that's like, we're kind of
holding each other accountable.
Yes. Yeah. And that could not happen 20 years ago, 25. Like you don't go down to your studio. Nobody's going to kind of call you out on it. So it is kind of interesting now. The online community I'm sure helps the next generation, which is awesome because you can really feel really isolated and that's hard.
So do you feel like you're still working at the same level or the same intensity, I guess, as you were in school?
No. And that was really hard for me to kind of like figure out now I'm commuting And I have to do I was on personnel committee and I'm doing this and no, you can't. And it takes a long time to get used to. For me anyway, I'm fairly myopic. I do one thing and I do it really well. And then I do another thing and I can get really fixated and I'm compulsive. And it was so weird to not, have the throttle wide open and that is all I'm doing. No, I got to stop. It was kind of like when you're learning stick shift and you kind of, fly forward a little bit and then your battery dies, it's like, oh. And I think my first 10 years out of school was really tough. Just trying to get some connection, with the material and keep all those plates up in the air and keep it going. I would stop and start and it's kind of like there were fits and, it didn't gel until really the last probably 8 years.
What changed?
I married somebody, I'm now separated, but who was an artist that was so dedicated. And he would go Kate, get to your studio. Oh, okay. And held me accountable. But it's still in the little bits of fits and spurts, but it's more I kind of forgive myself now a little bit more too. Because I start to see that many people have to work like this with a job. It's difficult.
Yeah.
And I try to tell my students that too. It's difficult. It's okay. It's not easy. It's okay. And I never ask when students come back from a visit or anything what are you doing in your studio? Because I know how rough it is getting out. And sometimes you don't visit because you don't want to be asked that painful question because maybe it's not in their studio. And it's yep, I remember that.
Do you have any practical advice for somebody who wants to start teaching ceramics?
Practical advice? What do you mean?
If you had a student come to you and say, I want to teach ceramics as a career, what should I do? What would you tell them?
Go to really good schools, go to people you want to study with, make sure you're very well versed in the material. And, don't just go to a school that has a package that you can get money for, it's a good deal. You have to go to a place that you want to study with that group. What are the peers like? What are your fellow graduate students going to be like? What are the facilities like? Who's the person that's teaching it? And hopefully there's more than 2 people in the area. So if you don't jive with one, you jive with the other. And what kind of work do they do? And that there is a hierarchy of what are you looking for and why? And that you also want a person that will support you in networking, keeping in contact. And 2 of our students have done the second student's now going out to do a post-bac with Josh DeWeese, Montana. Great program, great person. I went to grad school with him. He's got so many connections because he ran the Bray for how many years. And the students have a specific aesthetic that they have in common with him that he will be able to really share in the visual language that they're after. And kind of similar, values. They're a vessel maker, they're potter, and he can speak to that. And your fellow students and grad students that you have, are you going to be one of 8 or are you going to be one of 3? And who are they attracting? Because you also want, those are going to be, the peers and your tribe that you're going to talk to and hopefully have conversations with for the rest of your life. There are people I've known since 1987 at Kansas City that I talk to weekly, if not, every couple days. And that's important. We also, in the school that I'm at, we started to develop this, just a room for the more advanced students so they could develop that kind of bonding. Because these are the only people, they go through phases where they don't like each other, they're getting angry. It's guess what? They'll be the ones that you'll call when you leave here and you feel isolated and you don't know what you're doing. They're going to be part of that, support network. So get used to it. And really, you guys are lucky. You got space, you got mud, you can play, you can make, you can, stay up late night and make work and listen to music. And those will be your best moments. And that you'll go back to those over and over again, those people, to set you kind of straight or right, because they know you at a certain level that other people don't, so.
It sounds like the community is an important part of what makes the school valuable.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because you're going through this experience and it's a pretty unique experience. And you look to your right and you look to your left, and those are the people. They're going to be like comrades in this. So when you get out, you're not as isolated. You've got some contacts. Like you spoke to Bruce. He was in grad school with me, and I went out to Peters Valley 2 summers ago, and and he mentioned my name to you, and it's like, that's the thing, hopefully there's some really good interactions, and then by word of mouth and relationships that you get exposed to new people. Like, now I know you.
Yeah. There we go.
Yay. Yeah.
So why don't you tell me where people can learn from you?
Well, I teach at the University of Wisconsin-Stout in small town Menominee, Wisconsin. We have the largest undergraduate in Wisconsin. We are a hidden gem that I feel really kind of needs to get out there more. I feel like we have a very good program with dedicated teachers, such dedicated teachers, and they are working artists too. So they have, they're showing in galleries, are being published, and they're active. That's important.
Do you teach workshops?
Yeah, I've taught various workshops at Aramont, Peters Valley. I teach them whenever they ask me at Northern Clay Center. This summer, I'm going to do the residency at Red Lodge, and then teach a workshop in Door County up in Wisconsin somewhere, in beautiful Door County, which I've never been to, believe it or not. So yeah, I get calls, and I go where I'm called to do workshops, and that can be very unique. Very unique experiences where you get a myriad of people showing up to study with you, which is pretty cool.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap it up. Thank you so much for being on my show.
Well, thank you so much for asking me. And I hope your pursuits in this are rewarding.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.
If you like this episode, you can visit us on iTunes and give us a rating. You can also find us on Instagram and Facebook at TWYH Podcast. This week, we have a new patron to announce. Thanks to Catherine Peters for your support. If you'd like to support the show, you can visit us at patreon.com/TWYH. And thanks so much to our listeners. I've been getting lots of messages and comments from people who appreciate what this show is about, and it's very encouraging. The future's bright, friends. We'll see you next time. Teach with Your Hands is produced by Amy Costello. The music is Admin by Poddington Bear. Hear more at soundofpicture.com.